Did you know that of all the quarterbacks who've started a Monday Night Football game at least 3 times, only one quarterback has a better record than Dak Prescott, who's 5-1. And that quarterback is Colin Kaepernick, and he went 5-0. This is the Numbers Game. I'm Cynthia Frelund, and let's break down Cardinals at Cowboys, our Monday Night Football matchup for Week 9. Wow, can you believe those games on Sunday? Just kidding. I'm recording this before the weekend even starts. So I actually do hope that ends up being true, but I'm pointing out the timing because it is a little unclear as to who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Cardinals. The latest news that I'm working from is that Kyler Murray was limited in practice on Thursday, but, quote, is preparing to return on Monday. So we'll go with that. But remember, I'll post any updates on my socials and below this video in the comments. So it's Arizona at Dallas. Dallas, the home team, is favored by 2.5 points. The total here, 54 points. What does my model say? Dallas wins 27-26, just a 1-point win. However, 27 plus 26, it's 53. So a little bit lower of a score than projected. So let's start with the Cardinals offense against the Cowboys defense, because that's where we always start. And we always start with the run game. So the Cardinals, they have rushed outside the tackles on 59% of their designed carries. That's the 6th highest rate in the league. In weeks 5 through 7, with Bam Knight and Michael Carter leading the backfield, that number went up to 64. So what are Knight and Carter's results over those games outside versus in, just so we can kind of see a sense of what's going on? Well, they combined for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns on 40 outside runs, compared to 62 yards and 1 touchdown on 23 runs between the tackles. Why does this matter? The Cowboys have allowed 5.7 yards per carry on rushes outside the tackles compared to 4.4 on inside runs. Remember, Michael Carter not on the team, so it's either Emeri Demercado or Bam Knight. And it's really probably a little bit more Bam Knight than Demercado. Either way, Kyler Murray himself has scrambled on 16.5% of his dropbacks this season. That's 7th most. So scrambles that have turned into passes, not so great. He's 3 of 12 for 48 yards with an interception. He also has taken 3 sacks in this situation. On scrambles that have turned into runs, however, he has better success with 144 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries with a career high average of 8.5 yards per attempt. So one interesting tendency to note, well, the Cardinals, they've used motion on just 58% of their offensive snaps. That's the 10th lowest rate in the league. But they've called passes on 65% of their snaps with motion, which is the 6th highest. So they don't use motion as often as other teams, but it's a pass 2 out of 3 times when they have motion pre-snap. And what are the results? Well, on dropbacks with motion, Kyler Murray's completed 74% of his passes. That's 4th highest in the league. He averages only 6.6 yards per attempt, though. That's 12th fewest. However, on dropbacks without motion, Murray has just a 60% completion percentage. That's 13th lowest. And he only averages 4.9 yards per attempt, which is 2nd fewest. We'll get back to that yardage and air yard situation in 1 second. But the Cowboys defense, they've allowed an 83.9 passer rating when not facing motion. That's 12th fewest. But when opposing offenses use motion, they've allowed a 134.7 passer rating. That is last in the NFL, but also highest, so worst from a defensive standpoint, since at least 2018. So back to that air yard situation. Kyler Murray has averaged 6 air yards per attempt this season. That's 2nd fewest. And he's targeted pass catchers aligned in the backfield at the highest rate in the league, 22% of the time. He's completed 86% of those passes. That's 7th highest. But he's averaging just 4.3 yards per attempt on them, which is 4th fewest. This short yardage passing situation is going to come into play here in a second. But let's keep going with kind of more color and adding more depth to the passing game in general. Because Kyler Murray, he's actually targeted open receivers. So those are defined as guys who have 3 or more yards of separation on 50% of his pass attempts this season. That's the 7th highest rate in the league. I didn't really realize that. It didn't feel like that when I watched that, but I bring this up because the Cowboys defense, they've allowed 55% of opponent receivers to get open by at least 3 yards. That is the highest mark in the NFL. They've given up 1,500 yards to open receivers, along with 13 touchdowns. Switching over to Dallas's offense against Arizona's defense, let's start with Javonte Williams, who's run between the tackles on 65% of his attempts. That's the third highest rate in the league. On such runs, he's averaging 4 yards after contact per carry. That's fifth most. He's forced 17 missed tackles for a league-leading 141 extra yards. Arizona, they've allowed the sixth lowest success rate, just 39% on inside rushes, holding running backs to just 2.7 yards after contact per attempt, and just 35 total yards off of missed tackles. Both of those numbers are fifth fewest in the NFL. So let's talk about the Cowboys' passing game strategy and the Cardinals potentially or trying to stop it. Dak Prescott has lined up under center on 19% of his pass attempts this season. Just so you know, the NFL average is 16.5%. Dak has the league's third highest completion percentage at 76.5% for 424 yards with 7 touchdowns and a passer rating of 140 on those passes. That's the second highest passer rating in the league when lined up under center. Now, the Cardinals, they've allowed the fifth lowest completion percentage on under center passes at 57% and have held teams to 6.6 yards per attempt on such passes, which is a yard and a half below the league average of 8.1 yards. Dallas has used 11 personnel, so 3 wide receiver sets on 65% of snaps, which is above the league average of 59%. They average the fourth most yards in 11 personnel with 6.8 per attempt. Arizona, they match 11 with dime, the second most often in the league. So 6 defensive backs, that's dime. They do it 41% of the time when opponents line up in 11. They've also allowed just 6.2 yards per play, which is slightly less than the league average of 6.3. One more matchup note here. Dak Prescott, well, he's completed 74% of his passes and averaged 8.6 yards per attempt against cover 4, along with 2 touchdowns. By the way, that is the 8th highest completion percentage, and in terms of yards per attempt, it's 7th most. Why do I bring this up? Because the Cardinals have played cover 4 at the highest rate in the league, 32% of the time, and they've allowed 6.7 yards per attempt with a 67% completion percentage. But the note here, the one I care the most about, they haven't allowed a single touchdown when they've used cover 4. Bottom line, I have a 1-point win for the Cowboys and Dak Prescott at home, 27-26. Part of the reason why is this tiny little edge in favor of Dak Prescott and the Cowboys passing offense against the Cardinals. And that is what happens when Dak Prescott is not blitzed. Here are the results. Ready? The 5th highest EPA per dropback at 0.19, the 5th highest completion percentage over expected at 6%, and the 10th highest dropback success rate at 49%. Arizona does not blitz very often. In fact, they do it at the 9th lowest rate, just 23%, and they've allowed the 7th highest dropback success rate when they haven't blitzed this season. One strategy note in case we get Jacoby Brissett at quarterback instead of Kyler Murray, which, by the way, changes how the game unfolds, but not the winner of the game. So keep an eye on that, socials, and again, below in the comments if anything changes. But my note here is on target share. In weeks 1 through 5 with Kyler Murray at quarterback, 46% of the Cardinals' total targets went to wide receivers, and 58% of their wide receiver air yards went to Marvin Harrison Jr. In weeks 6 and 7 with Jacoby Brissett, Harrison earned just 25% of the team's targets and 37% of the air yards. Both Zay Jones and Michael Wilson had higher target shares with Brissett. Now, Harrison caught 20 of 32 targets for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns with Kyler Murray at quarterback, compared to 4 of 8 targets for just 90 yards with Jacoby Brissett, which means it is time for Good for 6. 6 stats to keep track of on Monday Night Football in Arlington, Texas. Let's keep these ones relatively simple until the end, where I have to kind of add some more risk, because who doesn't love a little bit of risky fun? Number 1, CeeDee Lamb to have at least 7 receptions. His stat line in my model is 7 for 78 and a touchdown. Dak Prescott, he has targeted receivers in tight windows, so less than 1 yard of separation, 20% of the time this season, the second highest rate in the league. And when doing so, he's earned 306 yards, the second most, with 3 touchdowns, which is tied for the most. Number 2, Trey McBride to have at least 7 receptions. See that number? 2 7s in a row? I kind of love it. He's caught 12 passes for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns on third down alone this season. He's converted 11 first downs. That's 3 more than any other tight end. Number 3, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s longest reception to be at least 24 yards. I already told you that Kyler split with targets and air yardage to Harrison, but he's also caught a 35-yarder from Jacoby Brissett, and he's 6 of 9 for 194 yards, which is actually the 4th most, and a touchdown on deep targets, so 20-plus air yarders, and that is his overall season numbers. Number 4, Dak Prescott to rush for at least 7 yards. He hits 11 in my model, which is actually about his technical average, which is 10.8, but he ran for at least 7 yards in 4 of his games so far this season, including 31 last week against the Broncos. So if the Cardinals can up the pass rush just a little bit, Dak could go for 7+ on the ground, and he's averaging 3 rushing attempts per game, so I like my chances here. Number 5, Bam Knight to score a touchdown. Here's that risk, baby. He's reached pay dirt twice in 4 games, and yes, it is risky, but also this targets a weakness in the Cowboys' defense. Number 6, a Jake Ferguson touchdown. Sure, it was not a heavy target or production situation last week against the Broncos. Basically, he was shut down, but Ferguson's 51 receptions and 6 touchdowns led all tight ends going into last week, and the Broncos defense and the Cowboys defense are pretty much on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And that's it. Week number 9 is in the books. Thank you so much for hanging out and going through all of these different breakdowns of every game with me. Please come back very soon. Thursday Night Football for Week 10 will be up very shortly. But mostly, thank you for helping me make this show get better every single week. I really appreciate all of your comments. I've been reading all of these questions these are really good questions. This is the smartest group of people I can imagine. So please keep them coming. I work for you. I want to make sure you are getting answers to all of your analytics questions every single week. It's so much fun. And I also hope that you had a lot of fun, or as much fun as I had, watching our new little fantasy helper. I think using smart people to tell us smart things to make us better at fantasy, what could be more fun than that? And of course, I always have to ask, because I think this is what you're supposed to do on these sorts of shows, please subscribe and follow along on your favorite podcast platform. Leave comments, reviews, all of the things to help us grow. I want to make sure that it's still like the best show you could possibly have. So please help me by doing that in return. And most of all, enjoy the football.